Botswana is hosting about 1,000 business and political leaders from the mother continent and the U.S. The four-day U.S. Africa Business Summit concludes tomorrow in the capital, Gaborone. It's taking place under the theme Enhancing Africa's Value in Global Value Chains. Newzroom Africa's business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo has the details.
The U.S. Africa Summit zoned in on ways to enhance Africa's value chains for global markets by facilitating foreign direct investments as well as strengthening trade and business relationships. Corporate Council on Africa CEO and President Flory Liza says while the event isn't over just yet, it's been a success with clear milestones set and met. She was excited to hear from South Africa's Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, who spoke on a panel on trade relations.
And he came and was a part of that discussion about, how do the Africans capture more of the benefits of AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, but how do we go beyond AGOA as well? So that was a great discussion, and I was honored to be able to be the moderator of that discussion. But we've had yesterday high-level dialogues on key sectors focused on various value chains. And I just want to say we had one on the energy and energy transition because that's very important. We had one on manufacturing. There was one on ICT and the digital economy. There was one on agribusiness. And I'm forgetting one of them, but basically we had these high-level dialogues and really key people from both the U.S. and the African side, leaders in government and leaders in the private sector, CEOs and others, to talk about value addition in those key. They're the ones that are driving growth on the continent.
She highlighted that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is essential to fast-track and enhance value chains on the continent. Liza believes this will, in turn, lead to greater access to global markets.
Obviously, the African Continental Free Trade Area has come up many times during the summit. It is a game changer for Africa because not only will it increase intra-African trade and allow Africans to ship more of their products to each other, facilitating movement of goods and people across the continent, but basically it also allows them to be pulled into regional and global value chains. And you can use an example. In apparel, just as, an example, Kenya is the largest sub-Saharan Africa exporter of apparel to the U.S. under AGOA. But the inputs for those apparel items come from other regions of the world. So I always say to people, what would happen if for Kenya's growing exports of apparel to the U.S., the zippers came from Tanzania and the buttons came from Uganda and the lining came from, Ghana or something. It then what you see is that it would allow the Africans to grow their own trade with each other while they're also growing their exports to the U.S.
The U.S. State Department's Joy Basu echoes the sentiments, explaining that this is where nurturing commercial diplomacy is an important concept.
Growth and development and prosperity is foundational for all of that. So for me and my team, commercial diplomacy is a concept that we think about. How do we use our diplomatic relationships to enhance our economic partnerships and particularly allow, American and African businesses to work together at all levels to meet the needs of our peoples. And so whether that is, at a large level with multinational companies that are doing trade and making sure that our supply chains are resilient, how do we use, our diplomatic power to make sure those conversations are happening? All the way to the other side of the economic spectrum when it comes to entrepreneurs, making sure that small and medium enterprises, which are truly such hubs for innovation, are kind of connecting, whether that's American technologies or, African ideas with incredible partnerships and entrepreneurs. How to make sure that the right people are connecting.
ABSA Regional Operations Group Executive Xavier Chibia says investment trends are changing on the continent. Large focus is being placed on ensuring that the small to medium businesses are brought along with the growth.
Before, you had a lot of investment going into natural resources and raw materials that were leaving the continent. That is obviously still an important part of what drives a number of our economies across this continent. We are also seeing a lot of focus now in terms of the value chain itself and adding value in terms of production. But also quite important is also how do you stimulate those small, medium enterprises. We as ABSA are working with a number of institutions in different countries, having partnered with those institutions in terms of how do you increase the level of participation of SMEs. And therefore, from a financial point, risk sharing with those type of institutions, which some of them are headquartered in the United States, and ensuring that we're able to provide different services such as the capacity building that is so important for the SMEs, but also ensuring that they do have a level of participation that gives them the ability to increase their competitiveness.
He does, however, warn that there are loopholes that must be plugged if the continent is to benefit from increased investment and improved trade and business relations.
Biggest issues across the continent is infrastructure, and that goes with physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, the investment that's still required on things like the transport network across the continent to ensure that you are more efficient to be able to compete is so important. Now, increasingly, things like power is quite important. And as we move forward, sustainability is something that's important as we talk about power.
Another key talking point at the summit was the cost of illicit trade on the continent's economic growth and the role that small to medium-sized businesses in the informal sector play in offering goods and services that are more affordable to more people.
Illicit trafficking on this continent costs about 5% of the continent's GDP, which is GDP that we cannot afford to sacrifice. We need to really be growing the African economies at a much, much faster rate in order to meet the needs of the people and the growing population. So first of all, from an economic lens, that siphoning off is really robbing this continent, of its resources. When I say resources, I mean, the tools that are available for its people. And that is, again, whether that is, wildlife trafficking, cigarette trafficking, to use your example, all the way to the tax base. But we can't punish, people in the community we talk about. They will rationally, buy the products that are affordable to them. And so we really need to solve this problem, from a bottom-up perspective.
Liza concludes that she's excited about the opportunities that Africa has to offer and that now is the time to get it right.
There's a vast opportunities that are here on the continent. They are going to be promoted and facilitated by things like AFCFTA, as well as harmonizing of the rules and the regulations. U.S. companies coming here don't have to deal with 54 countries with 54 different sets of rules and relating to trade in a particular area. They really will just have to look at one set of harmonized rules, and I think that's going to be really beneficial in terms of promoting U.S. Africa trade. So there are vast opportunities in Africa. This is the best time to do it.
The summit comes after the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. last December. For Newzroom Africa on Channel 405, I'm Ntokozo Khumalo in Johannesburg.